Hi and welcome back to the Escape Room Scholar. I'm Rob and I'm excited today to be in this pretty amazing looking escape room talking to Harry, a game designer that's been doing some pretty neat stuff. So let's get started. Now, Harry, tell us about how you started your interest in escape rooms in the first place.
Sure. So I was a video game designer in the past. I made puzzle games and I was really interested in the way that people played well together. So not just in a video game where you're by yourself solving a puzzle, but actually if you're playing a board game or if you're playing a cooperative game, what does that mean to play with someone else in a nice way?
So it's the team dynamics there that's really coming out.
For me, definitely, or a social dynamic. And it's interesting, even in a single player game, there is a dialogic approach to thinking about games where you've got the makers of the game and the player of the game, and they're actually in dialogue with each other.
Well, the people playing probably don't normally think about that. But...
No, that's true. But that's where my interest began. So I was making video games and I said, I really am interested in like real life games, and started making almost like games for a playground, inspired by, the games that you play as a kid when you're playing tag. And that slowly evolved into narrative heavy games and live action role play, and now escape rooms.
Awesome. Well, it's going to be on the screen, which is also pretty cool, and something that's hands-on as well.
Definitely.
I imagine you've completed a fair few escape rooms, or at least attempted a fair few escape rooms. I'm sure you've completed them. How many do you reckon you've done these days?
I'm actually still trapped in an escape room right now.
Oh, no.
I've done a lot of escape rooms, but I did a research project with 9 other game designers, researchers, and curators back in something like 2018. And we went to Kuala Lumpur and tried to play every escape room in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia.
And how long did you do that in?
We did that in 1 week, and we managed to get through 51 escape rooms in that week. So that was...
Your brain must have been pretty fried at the end of that.
Definitely. It was oversaturation. But I think that exercise taught me a lot about what are the really common themes and tropes of escape rooms, particular to that region and stage of development in the kind of broader development of the industry or the medium. And it also taught me a lot about how to communicate well in an escape room. So I did get out of all of them, luckily. And I think all up, I've probably played close to 100.
Yeah. And it sounds like no one from your team killed each other in the process. So.
No, there was definitely a moment when we actually were laughing deliriously. We were just staring at each other and like, why did we choose to do this? But it was all in good fun. We also started adding additional challenges on top of some escape rooms. So when we thought it was too easy, we said, okay, this time everyone except one person is just going to close their eyes the entire time and see what that feels like.
There you go. Just if it's not hard enough,
just add some extra challenge.
Add an extra hurdle. Now, if someone's watching this and thinking, I've never done an escape room before, I'm not sure about the whole idea of it. I'm not sure if I really want to be locked up in a room. What would you say to them?
Man, play with the people that you like playing with. If you have a group of friends that you enjoy hanging out with, chances are you're going to enjoy an escape room, because really, at least in my opinion, what an escape room is a chance for you to get together with some friends and have a good time. And everything around it, the theme, the puzzles, the set dressing, it's just a trick to get you to have a good time with your mates.
Sure.
So if you've not done one and you're scared that you're not going to be smart enough for the puzzles, or you're going to be too scared for a particular moment, there are lots of different escape rooms out there. You can choose one that's more story-based. You can choose one that's less scary.
Yeah, maybe don't choose a horror one.
Maybe don't choose a horror one. Yeah, we've had people freak out a little too much, but there's probably something out there that you'll enjoy.
Yeah. Tell us about this escape room build.
Yeah, so we're currently in Earthrise One. It is a sci-fi spaceship, and you are a maintenance crew that has been sent up to discover what's going on because we've lost contact with this ship. And when you come on board, everything's a bit in disarray. There's a mystery to be solved here. And what I love about this escape room that we're building is everything makes sense contextually in the world that we're creating, and we're really trying to tell a story that you can follow, that you can immerse yourself in, and by the end actually make some pretty tough decisions that will change the outcome of that story.
Yeah. Oh, I've got to say, it's really impressive, and even having things like this around with, can I say, sliding doors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Secrets is here. Oh.
This just reminds me of like those sliding doors from Star Trek and things like that, going into the mission control center and things. Really impressive. It's not just one of those escape rooms where it's just an office that's been a few things stuck up around the place. There's been a lot of thought that's gone into this. So.
Nothing wrong with those kind of escape rooms, but a different type of experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's what excites me, is that escape rooms as a medium are evolving in many different directions, and they're starting to recognize that actually they're adjacent to a lot of other art forms. So immersive theater and video game design and live action role play. All these things are developing concurrently, and we're starting to see a lot of the crossovers. So escape rooms can be, something that you play at home, set up a home office to be something really exciting and fun for your kids.
Yep.
And it can be something as, imagination, extravagant as a set like this.
Yeah. So most of the escape rooms I've been involved in have been in the classroom, getting students interested in escape rooms and in STEM or whatever the topic is. And they're a little less extravagant than this.
Yeah.
Just I don't have the budget for it, and I've got lots of students, I just can't fit them all in.
Totally.
But when you get the chance to do something like this, it's really something special as well. So escape rooms have diverged a little bit in recent years, and you kind of hinted at that you've got the traditional escape room, something like this, where you go into a room and there's a story and a theme and things. You've got online variants and things like that, and there's different types of them. You've got the play-at-home ones, where it's escape room in a box sort of thing. Where do you see that sort of going, and the different directions that might be heading?
When we look at the history of escape rooms, there's really a kind of cyclical remediation that you can see, not to get too academic about it.
Sure.
But it's like, you start with the idea of an online video game that puts you representationally in a room. And then we made the real life version of it and said, oh, what if we could bring the video game to life? And then later we have now video games that are trying to make virtual the physical space.
Yes.
You're kind of going back and forth.
Video game where they say it's an escape room, but you're not in the room.
But in not the room, but it's on your phone. How wild. And now we're kind of seeing another kind of hybridization where you're getting video games that are escape rooms and all sorts of things. And all the way through these developments, something has been really fascinating to me is that there is the sense of communicating what the thing is to the audience is pretty much the thing that defines the genre. So when we played 50 escape rooms in KL, we were trying to say, well, what are the common elements that made all these escape rooms what they are? What is the definition of an escape room? Do you actually have to escape? Do you have to be locked in? Does it have to have puzzles? Does it have to be multiple people? Does it have to be in real life? So once you start breaking it down, you realize that no one element is critical to the definition, and instead it's just this cluster of different ideas. So when you talk about where's the future going, I think it's going to be a Cambrian explosion of different experiences that start to find their own niche audiences as they learn how to communicate best what makes that thing unique.
So people can self-select in the area that they like.
Exactly, and you can get audience development. You can get people who are like, I really love puzzles and I want an escape room that gives me that puzzle solving satisfaction. And you have other people that will be able to self-select into, I want something actually that's not escape roomy at all. It's more like immersive theater. So in Melbourne, we have things like Love, Lost, Lost, and Malthouse had I can't remember the name of it, Because the Night, I think,
Sure.
Newest sequel. So I think what we'll probably also see is not just the branching out and I guess new definitions of new different, like these strands. We'll also see the intertwining of existing strands of work.
That's really interesting because some of the first journal papers I wrote in this area, I had a reviewer write back, this isn't actually an escape room, it's something that you do on a table and it's using this decoder box thing, and said, well, you can buy things from the toy store that say escape room in a box that are pretty much the same thing, implemented in a similar way. And now I think there's a lot greater recognition, particularly in the education space of, well, there's a lot more diversity in escape rooms. It's not just a room that takes a professor an enormous amount of time to set up. It's also something that can happen in the classroom. There's all those different things. And you've got some of those key things like a narrative and like puzzles. And what other things, you mentioned there were a bunch of things that collectively would define an escape room or would be common. Can you share those with us?
Oh boy, yeah, I'm going to have to eat my words because as soon as you start to define it, we'll come up with counterexamples.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I would say, without trying to be
Let's not nail it down completely.
So I guess we don't have to define the edges of it.
Yeah.
But I would say commonly escape rooms include puzzles or some sort of activity that involves making logical connections that make you feel smart. They allow you to become the hero of the narrative in the story. They have a story. Oftentimes they'll have a story. Sometimes that story is quite involved and can be, you actually get a development of plot. Sometimes it's more of a setting or a theme, and you're just feeling as if you're immersed in a world that is not the everyday life. And oftentimes, just as a side note, those settings are quite tropey. They draw on really familiar settings because it's easier to get players and audiences immersed into those settings because they're actually filling in the blanks with their own knowledge.
Yeah.
I think thirdly, it's the sensation of being in a physical space with people. Now, I know people will say, wait, digital escape rooms don't have a physical space and they're not always with people. That is true. But even when thinking about digital escape rooms, there's actually a sense of exploration of a virtual space and a spatial connectivity that makes it an escape room as opposed to just a series of abstract puzzles.
Yeah.
And that's not just thematic, it actually, I think, relates to the way that we navigate and think about space. And the same, even if you have an escape room in a box, there is actually a sense that you are navigating through a structure. So it doesn't have to be a literal physical space, even though I've just said physical.
Sure.
Yeah. But that sense of progression, of unlocking, of exploration can definitely be something common to a lot of escape rooms. And then finally, and perhaps most dangerously, I would say that escape rooms are designed to be entertaining. Now, that's not to say that they must be. They can be engaging in different ways. But one of the reasons why escape rooms have captured people's imagination so well is also that they, as an industry, evolved to become an entertainment option for your friends to go and play, or for you to go and buy online and play, which sets it apart from a non-profit art form, for example. Like the industry and the medium co-developed. There are more and more explorations into what escape rooms look like when they're not commercially driven. Escape rooms for other purposes, such as education.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of my key research areas is around the educational escape rooms. How have you forayed into that sort of area, and where do you see that going?
Yeah, so for the State Library of Western Australia, celebrating their 125th anniversary, I was commissioned along with other creatives led by Dr. Kate Raines-Goldie to make an escape room. And that was an escape room that explored the history of some of the key pivotal moments in Western Australian history and in the library collection. That was really cool, and the audience response was brilliant. People really enjoyed being able to play with the concepts that then were in the library's collection. They were able to tangibly interact with history in a way.
And I think libraries have kind of gotten the concept of escape rooms. I've seen quite a few of getting into escape rooms fairly early on in the piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's because they're much more engaged in public participation.
Yes.
They're spaces for the public, and so they're very attuned to what is going to actually engage the average punter with something that's often quite dry or difficult to access.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. And then you can see also escape rooms starting in education space for all ages, and more broadly, escape rooms as an artistic medium, exploring what kind of stories can you tell and what kind of, what do you want to say with this experience? If you have a bunch of people captive quite literally for an hour or two, how are you as an artist going to transform them for the better is one really interesting question that escape rooms are starting to ask as well.
Yeah, so it's not just about knowledge, it's also about how they respond and how they think.
Absolutely. So as an example, in Earthrise One, one of the themes is in this kind of far future scenario or alternate history scenario, space colonization is occurring, and we're trying to take over Mars and set it up for human habitation. And one of the problems this poses is, well, what about Earth and the environmental challenges that we've caused on Earth? Are we just leaving Earth and going to destroy another planet? There's questions about what are the ethics of ownership of a new place. Even if there's no one living there, what does it mean to colonize a space that you haven't, been to yet? And is it just first there gets the whole piece?
Yeah, sure.
So there's some interesting moral dilemmas, and what we then did actually was take Jack, my co-creative director, gave a presentation at a night where there were actual space scientists and people involved in astronautical engineering. And we raised these philosophical questions, and the response he got really blew us all away, because they were like, yes, this is exactly what we're interested in exploring. Wow. We want to know, 20, 30 years in the future, how humanity is going to act. So if an escape room can be a medium for exploring those deeper philosophical questions as well, that's awesome.
Sounds like they might be your customers.
Yeah, well, they asked if all 50 of them could come at the same time, and we're like, no.
There's not enough room quite in here.
Yeah. Space is large, but the spaceship is tiny.
Yeah. So tell me about how you get your inspiration for the puzzles and the narratives and the ideas. Where does it all come from?
I think with any creative endeavor, there is an opportunity and danger in looking at its history. The opportunity is you learn what went really well and how people did things, and you understand the medium more granularly. And the danger is if the input is too insular, you can't create new things.
Do the same thing as has always been done.
Exactly, yeah. And that's particularly prevalent, I think, in games industries broadly. So it happened in the video game development industry, where independent developers were making the big bets on unusual mechanics because it's what they loved and treasured, and they wanted to explore that space, and it was really kind of personal expression. And then the AAA studios needed safe bets that you could make money off, right? So it is with escape rooms, but here industry and personal collide, because most escape room owners are people who just love escape rooms.
Yep.
And so they have a particular passion for a thing, and for better or for worse, it was fairly looking at itself quite a lot, and so escape rooms became quite, I'm going to say monocultural, hopefully not in a bad way, but in a way that for certain we had a glut of escape rooms that were all the same feeling thing. And I think part of that problem is when you don't have enough diverse inputs.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's about how many different inputs can we have? Can we learn and grow from other media like theater, architecture, gardening, cooking,
yeah,
as far flung as those.
And this certainly breaks the mold of that. And I imagine you're talking to a bunch of different people and getting their input into things as well. And
definitely
that helps spark some of those ideas as well.
And we're so lucky to be an incredible team working on this project. I mean, we have Jack, Sandy, David, myself, Sarah, just technical engineers, sound designers and artists, narrative artists, people thinking about experience design. And we have worked in the past on this same project with actors and poets, and it's like actually escape rooms require so many different minds and thinking, not just to solve them, but to make them, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell us a bit about the testing process you use? Because I tell people when you're designing an escape room, testing is essential. You don't just give it to your students or unleash it on the general public and watch it go to disaster.
That's right, yeah.
So what do you do, and how do you use that data that you get from your testing?
There is nothing so humbling as watching someone solve a puzzle that you've designed, because you think it's the best.
Yes.
And they are struggling and not having fun, and you go, oh no, I've really messed this up. Test early, test often, and it's like the fail early, fail often kind of mentality. You want to be doing a lot of small iterative design on sanding down all the rough edges of the idea. But then what I would say is whatever idea it is that made you excited in the first place, be really bold and ambitious about that. So then the trick is, how do you find the idea that's big and bold and ambitious, but you can test a small little version of it? So that's how we do testing. Let's say that it's a puzzle that, early on, discarded puzzle, we were like, what if the entire back section of the spaceship was damaged and on an angle like this? And then you had a whole bunch of puzzles that relied on gravity being wonky.
Yeah.
And it would feel strange, right? Being like walking sideways for a little bit. And we realized quickly on by testing that it just was an awful experience being lopsided for any more than maybe 3-4 minutes.
Yeah.
And so all of the puzzles that I had designed for it were completely useless, because you're not going to want players to be in that kind of environment for longer than that.
Yeah, but it's good that you found it out.
We found it out earlier.
Before.
Well, yeah, but if I had done the test first, then I wouldn't even have designed the puzzles.
Sure.
Sort of thing. But yeah, this is that balance of like, what's the big idea and how do you test a small version of it? That's how we did testing.
That's really helpful. That way you don't go too far down the path of...
Exactly. Yeah. If you try to design the whole thing A to Z with perfect fidelity and granularity, it's going to be a hot mess.
Yeah. Maybe there's someone out there that is thinking about escape rooms and thinking, I'm going to design my first escape room. Thinking back, I don't know, 10 years or whenever you started designing escape rooms, what advice would have you given yourself back then? What advice would you give them today?
Yeah. I think the major piece of advice is you just want to get something out. And it doesn't have to be the grand vision in your head. And the reason is when you get something out, then you actually go through the process as a whole from start to finish, writ small. And you get to practice every part of that process in a small way where it doesn't matter if you fail. So I would say don't go and, remortgage your house and,
Sure.
and start a business without having tried first to just like make a small escape room in a weekend.
Yep.
And the scope of that first attempt should be really, really small. So it's like, oh, can I make a compelling puzzle for my friends that I know will take 2 minutes? And so being able to practice that design capacity will give you the building blocks or the toolkit for how you decide to knit that together later into a full experience. Yeah.
And like that's a fantastic way to learn, to bite off small chunks and practice it. How about taking that not just from the escape rooms, but focusing a bit on the educational escape rooms? And maybe there's a teacher out there that's thinking, oh, I'd love this in the classroom. What would you tell them? And any thoughts or suggestions for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in pedagogy.
Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts on it, but I would say teachers are going to know their students and the curriculum and the specifics of what is best for delivering that material. But one exciting thing is that escape rooms can teach more than that, and often unintentionally or as a byproduct.
More than just the knowledge.
More than just the knowledge, right? It can be about communication and teamwork and these, what we think of as soft skills, but actually are really critical for how we operate in the world. And so if something seems to not be working or is working really well for a particular reason, that's fantastic. But I guess my advice is don't discount the fact that escape rooms are not just a glorified test, right? It's actually an experience, and that experience itself can be growing and changing. And I would say, yes, you've got your content that you're trying to teach and the pieces of knowledge, but more broadly, what is the purpose of education? For me, at least, it's kind of coming back to that artistic question of if you have the ability to transform people, in this case your students, and be transformed by them as well, then what is it that we're leading them towards or going and exploring together?
Yeah, it's a much bigger question than what we first might have thought of.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I want to teach coding, but maybe this is actually about how to be a responsible adult. I don't know.
Or maybe both.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Thanks so much for speaking with us today. All the best for the launch of Earthrise One.
Thank you.
I said that right, didn't I?
Yeah,
Earthrise One.
If people want to come check it out, go to earthrise.one and you can book in to play this escape room. Hopefully it'll be open by the time this podcast comes out. We'll see. And also the podcast, the trip to Malaysia that I mentioned, I actually did a podcast about my adventures, and you can hear us go slightly crazy in real time.
Oh, fantastic. We'll link that in the description below.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Excellent. Thank you.